Boom, boom. The vast spiritual energy of the world raged, and on the towering peaks, giant drums rose up one by one. With heavy strikes, a deep and intense drumbeat resounded, causing heartbeats to race as the thundering sound echoed throughout the heavens and earth. Amidst the resounding drumbeats, the eyes of the powerful forces in all directions involuntarily turned toward the 19 massive white jade platforms atop the main peak. On these 19 white jade platforms stood 19 figures, each surrounded by dazzling spiritual light, with terrifying spiritual pressure radiating throughout the world. These were the true heavenly supremes. Looking at this scene, the majority of the powerful forces present couldn't help but exclaim, their eyes filled with envy. After all, in the Great Thousand Worlds, it was quite simple to measure the depth of a superpower by counting how many heavenly supremes it possessed. Generally speaking, a superpower with only one heavenly supreme barely met the threshold to be considered a superpower. Only those with multiple heavenly supremes could be considered top tier. However, the Futu ancient clan, right before their eyes, had revealed a total of 19 heavenly supremes, and it was clear that this was not even the full count. These ancient clans always had hidden cards, powerful forces that were feared but not known. This was the true essence of their depth. An ancient clan that had accumulated strength over thousands of years. Ordinary superpowers might shine for a moment, but would eventually fade into obscurity. It was only these ancient clans, developing steadily and persistently, who had weathered countless calamities and grown ever stronger. Faced with the depth of the Futu ancient clan, even Chen couldn't help but feel a solemn expression in his eyes. The 5 great ancient clans were truly as legendary as their name suggested. It seems that if Mu Manor wants to endure in the long term, I must focus on cultivating, Chen thought thoughtfully. Although Mu Manor could now be considered a superpower, it was all supported by him alone. It could hardly be considered a true foundation. Compared to the Futu ancient clan, it was like a firefly compared to the bright moon. However, Mu Manor was newly founded, full of vitality, and had already achieved quite a lot. Chen believed that, if given the chance, they could dominate the Tianluo continent, one of the 10 supercontinents in the Great Thousand Worlds. With the existence of the ancient heavenly palace, he was confident that in the future, Mu Manor would produce countless geniuses. In time, it might even rival the boundless fire domain or the martial realm, becoming one of the top superpowers in the Great Thousand Worlds. At that point, it would not be weaker than the Futu ancient clan. With these thoughts in mind, Chen's attention gradually focused back on the 19 figures. He vaguely noticed that the 19 white jade platforms seemed to be clearly divided into distinct groups. Overall, the 19 white jade platforms seemed to be divided into 4 groups. I suppose this is the Xian lineage, lineage, Qing lineage, and the other branch lineages of the Futu ancient clan, Chen muttered to himself. His gaze first gathered on the Xian lineage's side because the aura here was the most intense. Vast spiritual light occupied half the sky. There, 7 white jade platforms were arranged in an orderly fashion, their heights varied. At the highest platform stood a man in a black robe, hands clasped behind his back. His face was exceptionally handsome, his eyes appeared gentle like jade, and spiritual light flowed across his body. Compared to the other elders, his spiritual light was the faintest, but the experienced individuals present all knew that this kind of energy restraint, like a black hole, allowed not a single bit of spiritual energy to spill over, as if he had fully merged with the heavens and earth. This was a sign of someone approaching the level of a saint-grade heavenly supreme. This man in the black robe had clearly reached the late stage of the immortal grade, and was continually seeking the breakthrough to surpass the saint grade. Looking at this handsome man, Chen's pupils slightly contracted. He could vaguely sense a dangerous aura from him. This person was clearly extremely dangerous. This is the leader of the Xian lineage, Xian Guang. He is the father of Xian Luo, and he is now considered one of the 2 most likely individuals in the Futu ancient clan to reach the saint grade. If he succeeds, he may well become the clan leader. Qing Shuang, who stood next to Chen, noticed the change in his expression. She followed his gaze, her face serious as she spoke. Xian Luo's father? Chen's eyes flickered, and he nodded slightly. His gaze then shifted downward, and he discovered that among the 7 elders of the Qian lineage, there were 4 who had reached the Saint grade Heavenly Supreme, and 3 who had reached the Spirit grade Heavenly Supreme. Clearly, to secure their positions, the true powerhouses of the profound lineage had all come out in full force. Among the white jade platforms, the only force that could rival the profound lineage's formation was the ink lineage. Though they were 1 person short, with 6 heavenly supremes, their momentum was still overwhelming, capable of devouring heaven and earth. At the top of the ink lineage's platform stood a middle-aged man in a black robe. His eyes were pitch black, and strange black patterns marred his face. A chilling aura emanated from his body, and with every blink, his eyes resembled 2 black holes, continuously swallowing the spiritual energy in the surrounding world. This is the leader of the ink lineage, Mo Gu. His strength is on par with profound light. Qing Shuang whispered again. Mu Chen nodded slightly. Clearly, this ink pupil was another individual from the Futu ancient clan who had the potential to step into the saint grade. Both of these individuals were capable of devouring the world, which explained why the profound and ink lineages had grown so strong under their leadership. Among the 6 members of the ink lineage, 3 were of saint grade, and 3 were of spirit grade. Their lineup was equally formidable. In the Great Thousand Worlds, they would be considered a top-tier superpower. Mu Chen's gaze shifted from the ink lineage and finally rested on the Qing bloodline's platform. Compared to the previous 2 forces, the Qing bloodline was at a clear disadvantage. They only had 3 people. Besides Elder Qing Xian, whom Mu Chen was familiar with, the one in the lead was an elderly man with graying hair. His presence was also impressive, radiating millions of spiritual lights that shook the void. Judging by his appearance, he too had reached the heavenly supreme level in the saint grade. However, when compared to the earlier profound light and ink pupil, the leader of the Qing bloodline seemed much weaker. The former two exuded overwhelming power, while the latter's presence resembled a setting sun, fading and weak. The path to saint grade could only be traversed by the most daring, fearless individuals, and the lack of sharpness in this leader of the Qing bloodline indicated that he was unlikely to ever reach the saint grade. "This is the leader of our Qing bloodline, Qing Tian," Qing Shuang said. Mu Chen nodded slightly and spoke plainly. "His energy is waning. He cannot compare to the other 2. Qing Shuang gave a wry smile at Mu Chen's assessment and said, "If Aunt Jing were in our Qing bloodline, what would profound heaven and ink pupil amount to?" Indeed, while profound heaven and ink pupil were still struggling to tread the path to the saint grade, Qing Yanjing had already reached the Grandmaster Saint grade on the Spirit Array path. In terms of achievements, she had long since surpassed them. "A lineage's rise cannot rely on one person alone," Mu Chen said indifferently, then shifted his gaze to the final group. There, 3 figures stood, each from one of the many branch families of the Futu ancient clan. It was said that the Futu ancient clan had established a rule long ago to ensure that 3 seats would always be reserved for these branch families in the Elder Council, so their positions were the least worrisome. Of course, what they had to worry about was that, with so many branches, some might covet the elder positions and seek to replace the original members. After observing all this, Mu Chen shook his head inwardly. It seemed that the only vulnerable one was the Qing bloodline. Boom, boom, boom. The drumbeats grew faster, filling the air with urgency. "Let's begin." The voice of Elder Futu Xian, the first elder, resounded from the peak of the main mountain. Whoosh! As the voice fell, immense spiritual energy surged outside the main peak. 3 beams of light shot forth, soaring into the sky, and without hesitation, they landed directly on the 3 white jade platforms belonging to the Qing bloodline. One of the elders, with snow-white hair and skin glowing like that of an infant, landed on the platform where Qing Tian, the leader of the Qing bloodline, stood. He slightly bowed and smiled, saying, "Mo Gu of the ink lineage, I humbly request your guidance, Qing Tian." This elder wore a smile full of warmth, his spiritual energy powerful, yet he was only of spirit grade. Despite facing Qing Tian, who was of the saint grade, he showed no fear. Instead, he wore a mocking expression. Seeing this, Qing Tian's face darkened. He turned his gaze toward the other two white jade platforms belonging to the Qing bloodline. There, light shadows appeared in front of Elder Qing Xian and another Qing bloodline elder. Profound lineages, profound scale. I humbly request your guidance, Elder Qing Xian. Profound lineages, Xian Jin. I humbly request your guidance, Elder Qing Yun. Two faint voices echoed in the air, drawing countless gazes. Looking at the two figures that appeared before her, Elder Qing Xian's face grew increasingly grim. The ink lineage and the profound lineage had acted in unison, clearly having planned this alliance well in advance. Damn it! Seeing this scene, Qing Shuang couldn't help but stamp her foot in frustration, her delicate face turning a shade of dark blue. The ink lineage and the profound lineage had always suppressed the Qing bloodline, but to think they would actually join forces at the bloodline tournament. Mu Chen narrowed his eyes as he watched the situation unfold. Mo Gu of the ink lineage, with his spirit-grade heavenly supreme status, was clearly destined to lose against Elder Qing Tian, who possessed an immortal-grade cultivation. However, the profound lineage's Xian Lin, in the later stages of spirit grade, was now facing Elder Qing Xian, who was at the mid-stage of spirit grade. Meanwhile, Xian Jin of the profound lineage, also in the mid-stage of spirit grade, was up against another Qing bloodline elder in the early stage of spirit grade. With this, the balance was clear: 1 defeat, 2 victories. The Qing bloodline's defeat seemed inevitable. Such ruthless tactics, Mu Chen sneered. The profound lineage and the ink lineage were clearly planning to remove the Qing bloodline from the decision-making hierarchy of the Futu ancient clan. If they succeeded, the Qing bloodline would be relegated to a branch clan, possibly never to recover. The plans of the profound and ink lineages were indeed shrewd. But today, with Mu Chen present, these two factions would find it far more difficult to achieve their goals. On the towering main peak, as the three figures launched their attack on the Qing bloodline, there was a low murmur in the air. It was clear to everyone that the two major factions of the Futu ancient clan had joined forces to target the Qing bloodline. On one of the peaks, many young members of the Futu ancient clan stood, including Xian Tong and Mo Xian, who were at the forefront. They watched the scene with mocking smiles on their faces. If today's events succeeded, the Qing bloodline would lose its position as the main branch, and the power of the Futu ancient clan would fall into the hands of their two lineages. It's your Qing bloodline's fault for having that Qing Yanjing, Xian Luo said coldly, a sneer crossing his face. If it weren't for Qing Yanjing's extraordinary achievements, their two lineages wouldn't have been forced to relentlessly pursue the Qing bloodline. Though imprisoned due to her crimes, once freed, her saint-grade grandmaster strength would surely boost the Qing bloodline's reputation. Many branch clans would flock to her cause. So, in order to prevent this from happening, the two lineages had to cripple the Qing bloodline before Qing Yanjing could break free. That way, even if she did escape, she would be alone and powerless to resist the combined might of the two lineages. And that's in child. Once we control the clan's power, we'll send the law enforcement guards to capture him, make him kneel before me like an ant, and hand over the eightfold pagoda. A cold glint flashed across Xian Luo's handsome face. He had once set his sights on obtaining the eightfold pagoda in the ancient sacred abyss, only to have it taken by Mu Chen. This was a humiliation he could not accept. He had always seen Mu Chen as a mere sin child, someone of low status, while he, as the young master of the Futu ancient clan, was of a completely different world. Yet, in their previous battle, he had lost to Mu Chen, a blow far worse than death. Meanwhile, on another peak, the members of the Qing bloodline looked pale, clearly aware of the dire situation. The atmosphere on their side was bleak. Not only the younger generation, but even the elders showed traces of sorrow. Among the younger members, Qing Ling stood at the front. As she gazed at the unfolding scene, her beautiful face grew grim, and she couldn't help but sigh inwardly. Why is Qing Shuang there? As she sighed, a voice suddenly sounded behind her, full of surprise. Qing Ling turned, her eyes scanning the distant peaks. Sure enough, she saw Qing Shuang standing there, and in front of her was a tall, youthful figure. Seeing that figure, Qing Ling's face changed, and she almost exclaimed in surprise. She had clearly recognized Mu Chen. What is he doing here at the Futu ancient clan? He's truly audacious. A trace of worry flashed in Qing Ling's beautiful eyes. She knew very well the current stance of the clan toward Mu Chun. If they discovered he was here, they would certainly capture him. Who is the man next to Sister Qing Shuang? As the thought stirred in her mind, several young talents from the Qing bloodline also noticed Mu Chun, and soon a variety of murmurs began to arise. In the eyes of the younger generation of Qing bloodline members, Qing Shuang held an extremely high status. Although she was as cold as ice, countless clan members secretly admired her. Wherever she went, she was the center of attention. However, at this moment, these young talents from the Qing bloodline noticed how close Qing Shuang was to a strange man. She even personally accompanied him. How could this not stir feelings of jealousy among them? This man doesn't look anything special. I wonder why Sister Qing Shuang values him so much. One voice, tinged with sourness, spoke up, and many others quickly echoed. Soon, the looks directed at Mu Chun were filled with hostility. A bunch of fools. Do you really think you're on his level? Qing Ling couldn't hold back a cold snort as she scornfully retorted. In comparison to him, you so-called geniuses are nothing but a bunch of idiots. Qing Ling was known for her sharp tongue, and at this moment, her words were particularly biting, leaving many of the Qing bloodline's talented youths red-faced with anger. Qing Ling, do you even know who this person is? Why don't you tell us who's so capable that it makes us look like fools? Someone angrily retorted. Hearing this, Qing Ling merely rolled her eyes and couldn't be bothered to respond. Even Su Luo and Moxin had suffered at Mu Chen's hands, so what more could these people expect? Although she had no idea why Mu Chen was here, she clearly understood that revealing his identity would lead to trouble. Therefore, she didn't plan to disclose it. Seeing her silence, others assumed she was just bluffing, and a clamorous discussion broke out. At the summit of the main peak, Elder Futu, the first elder, also looked down at this scene. His brows furrowed slightly, but in the end, he didn't say anything. He was well aware of the schemes of the Su bloodline and Mo bloodline, but their actions didn't violate any rules. So, even as the first elder, he couldn't interfere. On the surrounding peaks, many powerful forces also watched the unfolding scene, whispering to each other. The Qing bloodline used to be so glorious, but who could have guessed they'd fall so far today? Indeed, the Qing bloodline used to dominate over all others. Even the previous clan leader of the Futu ancient clan came from the Qing bloodline. Now, look at them, reduced to this state. It seems after today, the Qing bloodline will become just a branch of the Futu ancient clan. Their former glory is unlikely to return. Many powerful factions sighed inwardly. Clearly, the Qing bloodline's past strength and present weakness left them all feeling somewhat melancholic. Boom. In the midst of these murmurs, the vast spiritual energy from the three white jade platforms suddenly erupted like a volcanic explosion, wreaking havoc on the surroundings. 6 figures simultaneously transformed into dazzling spirit bodies, their every movement exuding terrifying power. The battle had begun. Qing Tian, the leader of the Qing bloodline, was the first to strike. He was clearly enraged by the Su bloodline and Mo bloodline's attempts to target his Qing bloodline, and he attacked mercilessly. The sheer force of his attack would have struck fear into any ordinary spirit, grade heavenly supreme. Mo Tan's expression shifted slightly, but he immediately sneered coldly. He had no intention of engaging head-on with Qing Tian. His figure blurred as he swiftly retreated, leaving behind countless afterimages. He knew that with his spirit-grade heavenly supreme strength, he couldn't hope to defeat Qing Tian. But it didn't matter to him. His role was only to make a small dent in the Qing bloodline's reputation. The real battle was happening on the other 2 platforms. Elder Qing Tian, you really are quite the force, Mo Gu sneered as he dodged Qing Tian's attacks. But unfortunately, you won't find any advantage on the other 2 platforms. Qing Tian's eyes flicked to the other 2 stone platforms, and his heart sank. Just as he had feared, facing the ambush from the Su bloodline and Mo bloodline, Qing Xian and another elder were quickly being pushed into a losing position, retreating step by step. At this rate, defeat seemed inevitable. I never thought the Qing bloodline would fall so far under my watch. I'm truly ashamed before our ancestors. Qing Tian's old face was filled with sorrow. Qing Shuang bit her lip tightly, blood seeping from her gums. But she paid it no mind, her gaze fixed unblinkingly on the earth-shattering battle unfolding on the 3 white jade platforms. Mu Chen, do you think Aunt Xian and the others can win? Qing Shuang asked, still holding onto a glimmer of hope, her voice trembling. Mu Chen, upon hearing this, immediately shook his head without hesitation. The Xian and Mo lineages have come prepared. The 2 who took action are stronger than the 2 elders of Qing lineage. The situation is set for a victory and 2 defeats. Qing Shuang's face instantly drained of color. Her jade-like fingers dug into her palm, drawing blood. It was as if she could already foresee the dismal future of Qing lineage. Mu Chen glanced at her, but said nothing. He simply looked calmly at the fierce battle unfolding on the 3 white jade platforms. Boom, boom. The vast spiritual power surged like the sea, crashing in waves that made the towering peak tremble. The overwhelming pressure of the heavenly supreme emanated from it, making those on nearby peaks feel the weight of the atmosphere. It's almost over, Mu Chen muttered, his gaze fixed on the stone platforms. Bang! As soon as his voice fell, Qing Tian, the head of the Qing lineage, slapped out with his palm, shattering Mo Gu's defense. The strike sent Mo Gu flying backward, spitting blood. Mo Gu flew off the platform, but laughed loudly. Elder Qing Tian is indeed powerful. I concede. Hearing Mo Gu surrender, the head of the Qing lineage, however, showed no joy. He swept his gaze across the other 2 platforms, and saw that the outcome had been decided there as well. However, this time, Elder Qing Xian and Elder Qing Yun made a critical misstep, both of them being forced off the stone platforms. Standing outside the platforms, their bodies were stiff, their faces grim. At that moment, the entire world seemed to fall into a heavy silence. It was clear to everyone that Qing lineage had lost. Haha. Thank you for the guidance, Elder Qing Xian and Elder Qing Yun. Xian Lin and Mo Tan laughed heartily, cupping their hands in respect. Their laughter echoed across the mountains, while those from Qing lineage stood in absolute silence, their faces ashen. The elders of Qing lineage were particularly devastated, with tears of despair streaming down their faces. From this day onward, Qing lineage would be demoted to a branch clan, their status plummeting to the lowest point. Qing lineage is finished. The results were decided on the 3 white jade platforms, and the world around them fell silent. Many superpowers watching this scene sighed deeply. From today onward, the Futu ancient clan would only have 2 main branches. Meanwhile, on the seats of the Xian and Mo lineages, Xian Guang and Mo Tong, the heads of their respective lineages, looked indifferent. Their eyes showed no emotion, unaffected by the fall of Qing lineage. Clearly, they had expected this outcome all along. They exchanged a brief glance at the sorrowful Qing Tian, their eyes flashing with faint mockery. Those from Qing lineage must surely regret not fully protecting Qing Yanjing in the past. If she had been here, how could their Qing lineage have fallen to this point? I am useless. Qing Tian, the head of Qing lineage, sighed bitterly, his old face becoming even more haggard under the gazes of many, filled with either pity or mockery. With this defeat in the competition, Qing lineage would lose another seat in the Elder Council. Only 2 seats would remain for them. According to clan rules, only a lineage with 3 seats could be considered a main lineage. From this point on, Qing lineage would be relegated to a branch lineage, losing untold resources and power. Reclaiming the position of main lineage would be a distant dream. Outside the stone platforms, Elder Qing Xian clenched her hands tightly, her face grim. However, the situation was already decided, and she could not change anything. She could only shake her head in sorrow. Now, all we can do is hope that Mu Chen can find a way to turn the tide. Otherwise, Qing lineage will fall like a collapsing wall, with everyone turning against us. On the peaks of the Xian and Mo lineages, Xian Luo and Mo Xian couldn't help but laugh out loud. Their long-planned schemes had finally reached the point of execution. Mu Chen won't be able to last much longer, Xian Luo said with a cold smile on his handsome face. Once Qing lineage was demoted to a branch, all obstacles would be removed. They could even send the law enforcement guards to capture Mu Chen forcibly. As for whether this move would provoke a backlash from Qing Yanjing, they didn't care. They had long criticized the first elder for being too tolerant towards Qing Yinjing. Now, having expelled the Qing bloodline, with two branches uniting in the Elder Council, even the first elder would have to consider their opinions. Meanwhile, on the peak where the Qing bloodline's clansmen were gathered, a heavy atmosphere hung in the air. All faces were filled with bitterness. The younger generation, who had once been squabbling over jealousy, now had no time for such concerns. Their expressions were all marked with fear, for they were beginning to understand just how devastating the loss of their main branch status would be for the Qing bloodline. The leader of the Tian lineage scanned the surrounding mountains, then, after a moment, smiled faintly. He looked towards the direction of the first elder and cupped his hands, speaking respectfully. "First elder, the outcome is decided. Please announce it." Atop the towering main peak, the first elder slowly opened his half-closed eyes. His gaze was calm as he looked at the sorrowful face of the Qing Tian lineage's leader. With a small sigh, his deep voice resonated throughout the heavens and earth. The Qing bloodline has failed in their challenge. One seat will be lost. The first elder's voice echoed like a hammer blow, completely shattering any remaining hope for the Qing bloodline. On the peak where Chen stood, Qing Shuang's once cold and beautiful face had turned dim and lifeless. Her bright eyes were now filled with a dull, gray hue. "It's over," she muttered softly, feeling a deep sadness. After today, she couldn't imagine the chaos the Qing bloodline would face. One thing was certain: their status would plummet to unimaginable depths. Chen, standing before her, also took a deep breath before stepping forward. "Chen, what are you planning to do?" Qing Shuang looked at him with alarm as he stepped off the peak and began walking through the air. She hurriedly called out, knowing that his sudden appearance would immediately draw attention. "Since I've benefited from your Qing bloodline, I will naturally return the favor," Chen replied with a slight tilt of his head, a faint smile on his lips. Qing Shuang stared at his retreating figure, clearly unsure of his intentions. Chen didn't pay her any more attention. He turned and walked through the air, his eyes fixed on the towering peak where the first elder stood. A deep, thoughtful expression passed through his gaze. "Futu ancient clan, you have searched for me for years. Today I have come. Let's see how you deal with me now." At this moment, the voice of the first elder continued to echo through the heavens and earth. Due to the failure in the challenge, the Qing bloodline is left with only 2 seats. According to the rules of the Futu ancient clan, their leader will be dismissed. Wait. However, just as the first elder's voice was about to finish, a clear and bright voice suddenly interrupted, ringing out across the still sky, breaking his words. The unexpected voice caused countless powerful figures to freeze in place. In the next instant, all eyes turned toward the source of the sound, and astonishment appeared on their faces. On one of the peaks, a handsome young man stood in the air, his hands clasped behind his back, his expression calm and composed, exuding an extraordinary aura. Who is this? What a bold person to interrupt the first elder's words. Many superpowers looked at Chen in shock and confusion. At the peak closest to the main summit, Yao Chun and Lin Diao both looked up at the scene. After exchanging a glance, they both smiled and said, "The real show is about to begin." Beside them, Xiao Xiao looked at Chen's figure and nodded slightly. "This guy is still as daring as ever." Lin Jing, with a playful smile, said, "Xiao Xiao, now Chen has the confidence to be this bold." Now that Chen had reached the heavenly supreme realm and could call upon the boundless fire domain and the martial realm for support, not to mention his own Mu manner and the demon-slaying king identity from the palace of the Great Thousand, in many ways, Chen no longer had to fear the Futu ancient clan. Xiao Xiao laughed lightly. Even someone as proud as her couldn't help but admire Chen. After all, to rise from nothing in the Great Thousand Worlds and reach this stage was no small feat. It was no wonder that even her father, a man of immense pride, held him in high regard. Today, let's see how this guy turns the Futu ancient clan upside down. As they spoke, atop the main peak, the first elder, Futu Xian, was briefly stunned by the sudden interruption. His gaze then shifted toward Chen, his eyes locking onto him. When Futu Xian first saw Chen, his eyes narrowed slightly. A heavenly supreme at such a young age was truly rare. Compared to him, Even their own young prodigies of the Futu ancient clan, such as Xian Luo and Mo Xian, were somewhat lacking. And for some reason, he always felt that this handsome young man seemed somewhat familiar. Who are you? Why are you interfering with the affairs of my Futu ancient clan? Futu Xian's expression remained calm, but his deep voice was like thunder, shaking the very heavens and earth. The pressure of his saint-grade aura, even when just slightly released, caused countless powerful figures present to tremble in fear. Meanwhile, not far away, on a mountain peak, Xian Luo and Mo Xian were staring in shock at Mu Chen the moment he appeared. They pointed at him, unable to speak for a long time, clearly never expecting him to show up here. The members of the Xian and Mo lineages around them looked at them in confusion, unaware of the reason for their stunned expressions. On the white jade stone platform, Elder Black Mountain was also in complete shock as he gazed at Mu Chen. Lowering his voice in disbelief, he muttered, "Mu Chen? How dare this Sin child show up here?" He had clearly arranged for a heavenly supreme to deal with Mu Chen. How could this person appear here now? Although Elder Black Mountain's voice was low, both Xian Tian, the leader of the Xian lineage, and Mo Tong, the leader of the Mo lineage, sensed it immediately, their bodies shaking in response. Mu Chen? Is this the Sin child? High above in the sky, Mu Chen, however, paid no attention to the countless surprised and doubtful gazes. He simply raised his head and met Futu Xian's gaze without fear. After a moment, he finally smiled, and his clear voice resounded through the heavens and earth. "I am Mu Chen. Perhaps the elder is unfamiliar with this name, but I believe my mother should be very familiar with it." "Oh." Futu Xian's gaze flickered. Mu Chen smiled again, and a coldness gradually appeared on his otherwise handsome face. His eyes gleamed like lightning as he stared at Futu Xian. With a clasped fist, he spoke each word clearly. "My mother, Qing Yanjing." As soon as these words were spoken, the entire world seemed to tremble. Countless members of the Futu ancient clan suddenly stood up in shock, their eyes wide with disbelief. This person was the Sin child who had caused the Futu ancient clan so much trouble for so long. "My mother, Qing Yanjing." Mu Chen's voice echoed across the heavens and earth, and in the next instant, it caused an uproar. Countless members of the Futu ancient clan stood up in shock, eyes wide with astonishment. His mother is Qing Yanjing. Then, is this person the Sin child? How dare he? How dare he come to our Futu ancient clan? He's truly walking into his own death. A wave of astonishment erupted throughout the Futu ancient clan. All the clan members stared at Mu Chen as if witnessing the most unbelievable thing. The name Mu Chen might still be unfamiliar to many in the Futu ancient clan, but the identity of the Sin child was known to all. His mother was simply too outstanding. A saint-grade grandmaster. With such strength, even the Futu ancient clan's deep foundation found it difficult to match. To reach this level was enough to show how astonishing Qing Yanjing's talent was. According to normal circumstances, Qing Yanjing should have become the clan leader of the Futu ancient clan. But no one had expected that Qing Yanjing had no interest in controlling the clan. She not only left the clan, but also secretly married and even had a child. That event nearly destroyed the Futu ancient clan. It even caused the elder to erupt in fury, forcibly imprisoning Qing Yanjing and constantly searching for the Sin child. However, this search bore no fruit until a few years ago, when Mu Chen was finally discovered. But to the surprise of many Futu ancient clan elders, Mu Chen had already reached the Earth Supreme level by then. Moreover, he had even seized the eightfold pagoda in the ancient sacred abyss, defeating the two greatest young prodigies of the Futu ancient clan, Xian Luo and Mo Xian, who had returned in defeat. Still, despite the surprise over Mu Chen's rapid growth, they did not pay him too much attention. After all, with the Futu ancient clan's strength, if they were not worried about Qing Yanjing's possible wrath, capturing Mu Chen would be an easy task. So, when the members of the Futu ancient clan saw Mu Chen not only refusing to avoid them, but also daring to show up in such a situation, they were all filled with disbelief. Amidst the countless shocked gazes of the heavens and earth, the first elder, Futu Xian, gradually regained his composure. He fixed his eyes on the slender figure of the young man in the distant sky, his aged face slowly turning grim. So you're the Sin child, huh? You really have quite the audacity. Do you truly think that just because your mother is protecting you, you can act with impunity? Futu Xian's deep voice echoed, devoid of any trace of emotion, yet it carried immense authority. As he spoke, the world trembled, and the wind howled. An overwhelming, terrifying force seemed to rise from Futu Xian's body, as if it could dominate the very heavens and earth, enveloping everything within its power. Under the pressure of a saint-grade heavenly supreme, countless powerful figures in the surrounding area felt their faces change, their eyes revealing a flicker of reverence. Mu Chun stood in the air, feeling that overwhelming force capable of destroying the world. Even though he had ascended to the heavenly supreme level, he still felt small under such a great power. So this is the might of a saint grade? Truly, the peak of the great thousand worlds. However, Mu Chen's face showed no sign of fear. Saint-grade heavenly supremes were certainly powerful, but Mu Chun had seen such figures before, and compared to the Flame Emperor and Martial Ancestor, Futu Xian was still lacking in a few respects. Taking a deep breath, his robe fluttering in the wind, his jet-black eyes gleamed with a sharp light. Stepping forward, his own heavenly supreme spiritual power erupted fiercely. Although his aura wasn't as vast and terrifying as Futu Xian's, it was still like a towering mountain standing firm against the terrifying winds and pressure. No matter how mighty the pressure came, Mu Chun remained unmoved. He might not be as powerful as Futu Xian, but he was also a ruler in his own right, a heavenly supreme at the spirit grade. So, Futu Xian's attempt to force his submission with mere pressure was a naive thought. Heavenly supreme. When Mu Chun unleashed his powerful spiritual pressure, the faces of the many powerful figures from super factions shifted. Especially the members of the Futu ancient clan, their pupils contracted, their mouths agape in shock. How is this possible? On a nearby peak, Xin Luo and Moxn were equally stunned, gazing at Mu Chen's figure in disbelief. They clearly remembered that the last time they had fought Mu Chun, he had just barely reached the great perfection stage. But how could it be that, in just over a year, this guy had broken through to the heavenly supreme level? What kind of talent and opportunity must one have for this? They prided themselves as the top young talents of the Futu ancient clan, the dragons among men, yet now, compared to this so-called Sin child, they seemed completely overshadowed. With that thought, their faces turned a deep shade of green, their eyes filled with jealousy as they looked at Mu Chun. On the peak where the Qing bloodline resided, the members of the Qing bloodline were also dumbfounded, their supposed young prodigies swallowing nervously. Now you see the gap between you and others, right? This person has reached the heavenly supreme at such a young age. Even Xin Luo and Moxin can't compare to him. What do you all have to compare with him? Qing Ling sneered at the scene. The young generation of the Qing bloodline exchanged awkward glances before forcing a smile. A heavenly supreme at such a young age was extremely rare, even within the Futu ancient clan. They couldn't fathom how Mu Chun had cultivated to this level, especially since he didn't have the resources of the Futu ancient clan. Compared to Mu Chun, they really weren't much. Although Qing Ling's words had been harsh, they were, in fact, true. Truly worthy of being Lady Jing's child. Such talent. Some of the older members of the Qing bloodline sighed in awe, then quietly lamented that if Mu Chun had been one of them, Xin Luo and Moxin would have been nothing. However, he really shouldn't have come. This is the Futu ancient clan. With his spirit, grade heavenly supreme strength, it won't do him much good. Despite the countless eyes upon him, Mu Chun didn't seem to care. He only focused on Futu Xian, smiling faintly as he said, I've been wandering the great thousand worlds for over a decade, and indeed, I have quite the courage. But this has nothing to do with my mother. It's not like the first elder, who enjoys using threats to imprison a woman. His words were laced with cold sarcasm, showing no intention of giving Futu Xian any face. He had kept this line in his heart for many years. Impudence. When Mu Chun spoke so bluntly, several elders of the Futu ancient clan immediately erupted in fury. Shouts of anger rang out in unison, and waves of overwhelming spiritual energy pressure surged skyward, shaking the heavens with their sheer force. What now? Are all the elders of the Futu ancient clan planning to attack together? Fine, then allow me to witness your strength today. But despite the elder's rage, Chen showed no fear. Instead, he laughed heartily. Ignorant child, seeking death, an elder bellowed, ready to strike. Stand down. Just as they were about to act, a deep voice rang out. Futu had spoken. He swept a glance at the elders, and they immediately lowered their hands and stepped back. Today was the bloodline tournament of the Futu ancient clan, and countless superpowers from the great thousand worlds were present. If all the clan's elders ganged up on a junior, it would bring great shame to the clan. After silencing the elders, Futu locked his sharp gaze on Chen and asked slowly, "Did you come to the Futu ancient clan today, just to show off your sharp tongue?" Chen shook his head with a calm smile. "I'm not that bored. I came only because someone asked me to." "Oh." Futu eyes narrowed. "To help the Qing bloodline claim a seat," Chen replied quietly. His words instantly caused an uproar. Even the members of the Qing bloodline were visibly stunned. It was clear they hadn't expected this. What a joke. What right do you have to fight for that seat? Besides, you're not even one of our Futu ancient clan. How could you possibly have any standing? A cold voice laced with disdain rang out. The speaker was Xin Guang, leader of the profound lineage, who looked at Chen with indifferent eyes. Chen only chuckled, then extended his palm to reveal a green token nestled within. "With this, do I qualify? The clan leader token?" The moment Xin Guang saw the token in Chen's hand, his pupils involuntarily contracted. "That's the Qing bloodline's clan leader token. Qing Tian, what on earth is your bloodline doing? How did this Sin child come to possess the token?" Mo Tong, head of the Ink lineage, turned to Qing Tian, his voice sharp with accusation. Under countless astonished gazes, Qing Tian felt a chill run down his spine. He exchanged a glance with Elder Qing Xian, then gritted his teeth and said solemnly, "You don't get to decide whether Chen is part of the Futu ancient clan. If he isn't, then let the first elder expel Qing Yanjing from the clan as well." This token was granted by a unanimous decision of our Qing bloodline elders. "I'm no longer suited to lead. From this day forth, Chen is our clan leader. If you have any objections, take them up with the Elder Council. For now, you have no right to overturn the Qing bloodline's decision." Qing Tian had made up his mind. Their Qing bloodline was on the verge of losing its position as the main branch, and they had long suffered under the suppression of the profound and Ink lineages. They had endured enough. If that was the case, why not place all their bets on Chen? Qing Tian Yu. Xin Guang and Mo Tong's expressions twisted with anger as they glared at Qing Tian. But Qing Tian merely gave a cold snort and swept his sleeve dismissively. He had borne enough over the years. At worst, they would lose their main branch status today. As for what Chen would do, that was up to him. Consider it a way to repay the hardships the boy had endured. The clash between the three bloodline leaders left the countless onlookers stunned. None had expected things to spiral this far. "Enough. All of you be silent." Futu barked, cutting off the bickering bloodline heads. His expression was grim. What was meant to be a dignified bloodline tournament had turned into a laughingstock. His eyes slowly turned to Chen. "Since the Qing bloodline has chosen you as their clan leader, that decision must go through the Elder Council. Even I can't overrule it right now. However, even if you are their clan leader, you don't just claim a seat by asking for it. If you want it, you'll have to earn it." The Qing bloodline had already lost their seat. If they wanted it back, they would have to challenge another bloodline and win it through force. But Chen, though he had stepped into the heavenly supreme realm, was clearly only at the initial spirit grade. Trying to seize a seat with that level of strength was nothing short of a fantasy. High in the sky, Chen simply smiled at those words and said, "No need for you to worry about that, First Elder." His voice faded as his figure swiftly flashed out, finally landing on the white jade platform, where the profound lineage was located amidst countless astonished gazes. At the same time, his cold, chilling voice echoed, "Since your profound lineage has taken one of Qing bloodline's seats, I will also take one from your hands."